Hello, everyone. Welcome to Domino Dialogues, where the domino table is our stage. Domino Dialogues is an extension of Somos Society, where we capture Puerto Rican history and its impact on Philadelphia. Our first guest today is Luz Colón, a Philadelphia native and advocate. Welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
Our next guest today is a giant, a Philadelphia legend, Angel Ortiz, the first Puerto Rican councilman, and plus so many other titles under that we will unravel today and speak about. Welcome.
Gracias. Bien.
Angel, I just want to get started today a little bit more about you. Like, where were you born, and when did you migrate to the States?
I was born in Puerto Rico, in Cagua. I came to Philadelphia in May of 1976 to head up the Puerto Rican Office of Legal Services, Community Legal Services, that was located on Girard Avenue and Fifth Street.
Before you came to Philadelphia, where were you raised?
I was raised in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I went to elementary school in Manhattan. I went to junior high school in Manhattan. I graduated from Seward Park High School in Manhattan. And when I graduated, I wanted to go to UCLA. Awesome. And my mother said, UCLA? What is that? I said, California. I said, nah. She said, nah. You're going to Puerto Rico, the University of Puerto Rico. UP. I said, what? I don't want to go there.
So, while you were raised in New York, can you tell me a little about what was the culture like? What was the Puerto Rican culture like in New York?
We were, my family, we were the beginning of the switching of communities in the Lower East Side. We got there in the late 40s, and it was mainly a Jewish community, but Puerto Rican has started moving in. There was a community, big one in East Harlem, El Barrio, but the other barrio that became a Puerto Rican barrio was the Lower East Side. And my family started moving in, my uncles first, and then my mom. And at 138 Ludlow Street, Orchard Street was the street where every Puerto Rican from all over the city went shopping.
Amazing.
Okay? And we lived, and Ludlow and Orchard was a street over. And you had this row of Jewish stores, right, going up and down Orchard Street. And that Puerto Ricans, my mom used to go in there to shop, and she used to haggle with the Jewish vendors, because you had to haggle, because you had to bargain and go. And I wish I could write it up, but my mom bargaining with the Jewish vendor, trying to get some pants for me, and she going, "Sol, no, that's too high, too expensive.
Was the Puerto Rican community united, tight? Was it family oriented?
Yeah, no, the 40s, 50s, what you had in the migration was the Puerto Rican working class. The people who migrated in the 40s and early 50s to New York City mainly was the Puerto Rican working class from Puerto Rico. The conditions, economic conditions in Puerto Rico had become so bad that our working class, and mostly female, okay, and then the male came, and that's why you had East Harlem and then the Lower East Side, and the first words and my mother learned in English was piecework, and I didn't know what piecework was. And piecework was, she worked in a garment industry, and she sewed blouses, and if she did piecework, that means that she did individual blouses, and the more blouses she did in a day, the more money that she got. So piecework was what she tried to do, and so she would leave the house at 6:30 in the morning. I would not see her until 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the afternoon, and my grandmother and my grandfather would wake me up and send me to school, man, give me breakfast, and send me to school. And we lived in a 6-floor tenement, 138 Ludlow Street.
At what age did you wanted to be a lawyer one time? You became a lawyer.
Yeah.
When did you know you wanted to be a lawyer, and what inspired you to be a lawyer?
Early on, I actually my uncle once asked me, right, what are you going to do? And I said, I want to be a lawyer, and I don't know, I just saw a lawyer on TV, and I like to argue. I, I talked a lot, and my uncle said, yeah, you talk too much. And so I decided I was going to be a lawyer. And the thing is, my guidance counselors did not believe I was going to be anything. So I had a guidance counselor, Ms. Betty Friedman, and she actually told me in the ninth grade, actually, I was in the academic course because I went from junior high to high school, and because I was competing, I had academic courses in the eighth grade. I went into the academic courses in high school, and she switched me to the general course. And I didn't know why, but I knew it was different because when I entered the class, Mrs. Bloom was the teacher. I remember her, a redheaded woman. I mean, you remember these things, right? And I entered the classroom, it was all Puerto Ricans. All Puerto Rican. And it was rowdy, loud, and it was 916, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95. 916 was all Puerto Rican, 91, 92, 93, 94, all Jewish, white, American, Irish, and so on. From 911 to 116, they were all Black and Puerto Rican kids.
Why do you think was that? What was the reason?
Racism.
Racism.
Because, my guidance counselor, said to me, Mrs. Betty Friedman, she said, and I had the grade, and she switched me from academic to general. And I didn't know, but I knew that general was bad because it was all Puerto Ricans. And I knew the other one was because it was all white and mostly Jewish.
Have you ever met a Puerto Rican lawyer before, prior to that? You wanted to be a lawyer?
I had met a Puerto Rican lawyer because in Puerto Rico, Efrain Cabrera and my uncle. That was his best friend. My uncle was a political person in Rio Piedra. And I went to Puerto Rico when my father died to the reading of the will. And I met Efrain Cabrera and Barreto, and they were lawyers. And I was, I said, wow, Puerto Rican. And they represented the family and so on. And when I came back, I said, I want to be a lawyer.
Your migration to Philadelphia, what sparked that? And I want you to touch up on that, like your migration to Philadelphia. And what did you see different from the culture in the Puerto Rican culture in Philadelphia? And what was the difference between the culture in Philadelphia and New York, right? Was there unity back then? Was there a struggle? How did you feel? Were you embraced, all the way around? If you don't mind touching up on some of that.
I had a life, right? I graduated from the University of Puerto Rico. And then I went to New York, back to the Lower East Side. And I went to graduate school. And I was getting a doctorate in sociology. And I got drafted. And I wasn't going to go into the Army. It was Vietnam. And I actually went to my mother. I said, listen, next time you hear from me, maybe I'll be in Cuba or in Canada, right? But one of my professors said, no, why don't you teach? I said, but I don't have any education courses. He said, teach and you'll get a deferment. So I went and I applied, and my graduate professor helped me get into a school, the O. Henry School in 17th Street. Mrs. Schwartz was the principal, rotund woman. And I had no education courses. And I walk into the school. I was this young guy, and I was very skinny, man. I weighed like 119 pounds. And I walk in with my hair, all that stuff. And she says to me, "Can you teach Spanish?" I, I hardly knew Spanish at that point, man. But I said, "I can teach Greek." And so she said, took me, put me in a classroom with all these kids, mostly Puerto Ricans. And they were going off the wall, man. So I didn't know. I never had an education course. So I didn't. All I remember was that teachers used to scream at me. And, when I was in school, they used to scream at me. And, the class. But these kids were going off the wall. So I sat down and I took out the New York Times and I started reading. And they went on for like 10 minutes. And finally, this kid, Jose, they all quieted down. And I remember because this kid, Jose, that I'm walking out of a building here in the City Hall Annex in Philadelphia. And this kid comes out of the elevator. It was him.
No way.
When I had moved here. And this kid, Jose, says, "Mr. Ortiz, why are you not shouting?" I said, "Listen, guys, I'm not a teacher. I'm a sociologist. And I'm here because," and I was honest, I said, "because I don't want to go to Vietnam." I said, "So you help me, I will help you, and we'll learn Spanish together."
Mm.
Right? And the kids, they did. But I said, "We'll learn Spanish together." Yeah. So I would go home with my wife, and I would do the lesson. I would, I didn't know where the accents went, but I learned. And we worked together, those kids. So I taught kids from 5th to 8th grade with a middle school at that point. And those kids reacted.
What I heard there was people, especially young people, appreciating someone being real honest about it, because you could have said anything else, but you was like, "Hey, I'm not trying to go to Vietnam." And that's the realest thing you could say, right? Instead of trying to.
If I try to fake it, man, it would have been, they would have known. First of all, they would have known. And the thing is, they reacted very well. Like I said to you, I met the kid Jose coming out of the elevator here about 3 years ago, something like that. And he goes, "Mr. Ortiz."
Amazing.
Wow.
That is amazing. So what was it like here coming into Philadelphia? Was it a shock? Was it a culture shock? Was it different? Did you run into any other Puerto Ricans that you knew in New York, in Philadelphia?
No, not really. Actually, I came to Philadelphia for 1 year. I said, I'll go to Philly for 1 year and then I come back to New York and practice law, right? Yeah. I'm here. It's been over 40 some years, man. I'm still here. Right? And I came to direct an office in the barrio of legal service. Right? And I had just graduated from law school, but I had worked at the National Puerto Rican Forum. Well, like for 10 years. I went to law school because I went to I was working in the National Urban Coalition, and we organized the first Boricua Chicano conference. And in 71, something like that. 71, yeah, first Boricua Chicano conference. And a group of Cubans from Florida came in to that conference, right-wing Cubans. And the Chicanos got up and said, "They don't belong. This is a Boricua Chicano conference. It's not the first ever conference in New York, in Washington, D.C.
So I have a question on that. What year was this?
1971, 72, I think it was.
So there was a movement where Puerto Ricans were collaborating with Chicanos, South Americans. There was.
No, we had a national conference together.
Amazing.
Okay. It was, and we got together all the Chicano leaders and all the Puerto Rican leaders, Puerto Rican Socialist Party, the Young Lords, everybody, so.
Now, you coming in for legal services, what were some of the struggles that you've seen? What were some of the issues that kind of like caught your attention, saying, hey, something needs to be done?
Well, when I came in, I just graduated. The thing is, I had graduated from Columbia Law, and '76, they called me and says, why don't you interview for this job, directing legal services? I had experience, because I was national director of programs at the National Puerto Rican Forum. And then I went to law school because something happened there. So, and I came here, and I was on the left. The Puerto Rican independence movement was big in the United States in the 70s and late 60s, Puerto Rican Socialist Party and so on. And Juan Mari Bra was very close to me, and Juan Mari, I said to Juan Mari, they offered me this job in Philly to direct legal services, but we're doing job. Right? So Juan Mari said, take it. When I came here, none. And then when they found out my politics, the leadership here was very conservative, still is, and what I hired, the staff that I hired was Wilfredo Rojas, right, who was a member of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party at that time. Saladin, who was a member of the leader of the African Nation Party. I put together a staff of young Puerto Rican and African American radicals. I hired her when she was 17 years old.
We're going to get to Luz soon in a minute. I can't wait, because this is leading into how you're impacting generations, because I just love how we went back into New York, you just being real and the influence and impact you had on someone, just being honest with them, and to now. You coming in the legal services, and we spoke about the politics a little bit. What made you decide to run for office? The
Democratic Party in '71, I think it was. No. The Democratic Party in 81 came out of a redistricting plan. I had a TV program. I had a TV program on Channel 10, WCAU, Latinos in Delaware Valley. And I interviewed David Glancy, who was the chair of the Democratic Party of the city of Philadelphia. And David was a good friend. He and I we met. So I interviewed David, and we started talking about redistricting and how the Puerto Rican was happening. And David said, I know, we just created a redistricting plan. And I had seen the plan, and I had it, had my notes. And he says, he looks at the map, right? Says, Puerto Ricans are not going to have power in 4 different districts. I said, David, you divided the Puerto Rican community into 4 different districts. Yeah, but you're influencing 4 districts. I said, and this is a TV show. Okay? I said, but look at the map. The Puerto Rican community is cohesive. They have boundaries, and all of the people that you divided all live within those boundaries. Now, if you put that grouping together and you make a district, we may not able to influence 4 districts, but we might be able to elect 1 Puerto Rican. And we'd rather have an elected person than influencing. And he said, yeah, but you have power. And no, I said, power is having an elected person.
Hold on one second. I'm sorry. That's a copy cool moment?
Yeah.
That's a copy cool moment right there. Can you repeat that, please? This is a copy cool moment. Can you repeat what you just said?
Yeah, power is having an elected person that represents your interest. I took that show. That show was shown on TV. And I went to Cesar Perales in New York. Cesar was the chair or the president of the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund and a good friend of mine. I showed the tape to Cesar. I said, Cesar, do we have a case? And Cesar said, yes, we do. So we sued the Democratic Party in federal and state court. Obviously, Channel 10 came to me and said, you can't do that. I said, yes, I can. He said, no, but you cannot invite somebody to a program that you're doing and then sue. I said, well, my career is not going to be on TV. So we're going to sue using the tape.
Wow.
So you use the tape. The district that we have today, we didn't win the case as such, but the district we have today, the one a state representative that we have, came out of that lawsuit.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. We're getting some gems. We're getting some gems dropped in here.
Yeah.
I love this.
After we sued, I was at Izzy's house, Izzy Colón, Israel Colón, with Manny Ortiz and Danny Rodriguez, who passed away, my brothers. Okay? And I said, well, we sued the Democratic Party. I think somebody should run. Puerto Rican should run. And Danny goes and says, but who? I said, well, I sued, so I think I, yeah.
This is good stuff.
I think, you know. And then he says, you're going to run against Harry Gennady, who was the district council person. He says, you can't. I said, no, I can't beat Harry Gennady in the Puerto Rican district. You know, I'm running at large, citywide. And then he used a word that cannot be said here. And he said, well, yeah, you kidding? Puerto Rican running citywide? I said, yeah, I was in legal services. I had a reputation. I had coalitions that I had the Black community, saw me as a person that represented them and so on. And I said, I'm running citywide. So I said to Izzy, you're the campaign manager. I said to Manny Ortiz, you're the campaign chair. And we were in Izzy's backyard. And I said, and we'll run. And they looked at me and said, you're crazy. I said, well, I quit my job. A legal service. I quit my job. And Lydia looked at me. My wife said, you what? You quit your job? I said, yeah. So we're going to run. And Manny was the chair. Nobody had ever had any experience in political work. I mean, they were all leftists and radicals and so on. And PETA, Izzy was the executive director of PETA. Manny became the executive director of PETA, and so on. And we formed a grouping of young Puerto Rican guys and women, Hilda, Rosie Archilla, women. And we ran. We spent $15,000. And we did a campaign citywide. And we didn't win. But we came very close. Okay? We came in 6. There were 5 elected. We came in 6, I think it was. And Wilson Goode ran. That was when Wilson Goode ran for the first time. And I was the first person in the Puerto Rican or in liberal community to support Wilson Goode. And when Wilson won, I lost, but I ran on his ticket. I came in 6, and then Wilson named me one of his deputies.
Amazing.
And 3 months after Wilson is inaugurated, and I'm working in the office, a council person, at large council person, commits suicide.
I remember that.
And I was on my way to New York with Lydia, and I heard it on the radio. We turned around, we came back. I said, we're running for that seat. And we went to the party, and we went, and said, I came in 6th. I should be the Democratic nominee. And we had the community together, and and I ran. Yeah, and I won.
And he won. I think, can we have a toast to that?
Toast.
Yeah.
So Mata toast.
Yes.
Yeah, and some of the
Go on, take a sip.
some of Puerto Rican leadership went to Wilson Goode. When Wilson Goode endorsed me, the Puerto Rican leadership, and this history, so it is not.
This is what the show's about.
Yeah.
History.
Yeah.
They had a meeting. Well, I mean, a huge meeting in the mayor's office conference room, and they were all against me because I was a leftist. I was a member of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party and all of that. I'm pro-independence, and our leadership at that point was very conservative, and they thought that Nelson should run.
You know what I find amazing about this, and we're going to speak about a few things. First of all, it's still an honor just to be here in the presence of someone that's the first Puerto Rican councilman, and just to sit here and hear the journey, right, of sitting in someone's backyard, making plans to make moves, to sacrifice, to do something. And just want to speak on your character. For me, from the outside looking in, especially as a young kid growing up, no matter what you've been through and no matter what your opposition was, you still had love for your people. I just, one thing that just stood out, right? You, even with the opposition, even with the name calling, whatever it was, you still made decisions based on the love you had for the community. So me personally, just being able to be here and say thank you for that and the influence you had on many people. Many people don't know, for me, I got in some trouble as a kid. I had a high publicity case and people rallied up, and you were one of those faces that were out there. And I remember as a kid, I was like, okay, I wasn't this innocent kid running around, but there were people out there fighting to make sure that we were treated fairly. And you were one of those people. So being on this platform, on this stage, on the Domino table, being able to tell you personally in front of the world, thank you. Because of those moments in my life, I do what I do now because so many different people, right? There's that saying, there's no such thing as a self-made man. Yep. We are made up of so many others. And you're one of those people, along with the Izzy Colóns, the Johnny Irizaris, the Angel Medinas, and it's pretty interesting too, because even your opposition, some of those folks I was still look up to, right? So it's just you picking and you have all those people. So it's just greatness all the way around. And to see that there was a movement, even though there was diversity in the group, but there was still a love for the community. So just a big thank you. And the influence that you have on so many people, and speaking on the influence that you had on so many people, one of those folks are here, Luz Colón. To see her journey and what she has done and continue to do, and her passion. And I remember mentioning to Luz that we were going to have you on the show, and just mentioning you a few times before, and her face lights up. She speaks about the impact and the influence that you had on her life. And I could see some of those moments when she turns into fire when she has to. When it comes to advocating, she's not going to stay quiet. She's going to say something. She's going to speak up, and she's going to express how she feels, and she's not going to worry about who's in the room. So I could see some of that influence as it happens. So, Luz, give us a little bit about yourself growing up in Philadelphia. What was the culture like? What are some of the things you observed and you experienced, and some of the things that made you feel like, am I going to make it? Can I make it?
Mhm.
And what was the support like?
So my mom, single parent, raising 4 kids on her own. And just like a lot of Puerto Ricans that migrated to the States, my mom was 15 years old and she was sent to Puerto Rico to babysit. And sometimes the culture was just like that, right? Where she used to live what they used to call el fanguito, which is a whole nother separate story. And I always say this, my mom could actually be writing some memoirs, which is amazing. But um, the reason that I mentioned that and just her hardship and just everything about my mom, Luz Roman, just shout out her name because I got to make sure I do that. I'm named after her, which is another honor, I would say. It was hard, difficult, lived in a very dysfunctional background, family, and growing up. So I think with her, fast forward, right, after New York coming into Philadelphia, North Philly, living around Mount Vernon, right, Fairmount area. And that's where she was, that's where she started to establish her life, having my oldest brother and then us, all those things. So eventually she, became a single parent and we lived in PHA housing all our lives, all our lives. And fast forward to where I grew up, which was right on Lawrence Street, Lawrence and Cumberland. And I remember coming from another unit, which they call the PHA units from 7th and Cecil B. Moore, was where prominently like a lot of African Americans, to a whole Latino area for me, which was like it was a little, I gotta admit, it was a little bit of a culture shock. And but nonetheless, I learned there too, right? My upbringing, where from there I went to John Welch, and then my mom, made sure I went to school in Julia de Burgos. But before, when I went in, I think it was the first year, they still called it Edison, or the old Edison, and then they changed it to Julia de Burgos. So I would say,
Did you know
growing
who
up-
Julia de Burgos was when you?
No, remember, born and raised here, right? And it's just like, okay, well, that's a Spanish name. Okay, oh, a woman, okay. But those are the things I really didn't register.
Because I didn't learn about her either, even though I knew
Exactly.
of the school and never knew who she was.
Right. And even more so because after having to go to Julia de Burgos, I then became an aspirante. And that there is where the essence for me of leadership was taught, right? Leadership. What is leadership? And I learned that for being aspirante, having to be able to have advocates from Aspira go into these schools and say, okay, wait a minute, we need to educate our kids. We need to make sure that they know our culture, and we need to do something. And they did. And they did that with me. I went to MASBOM. I went to obviously a vocational school. And so, again, I obviously, just like any other kid, they go to school and then you're like, okay, you're just trying to figure it out, figure your life out. Like, what do you really want to do? And I think for me, I took dancing very seriously. I was very, like I told you, I was very much into house music, dancing, and I did really, really well. And I've had such a passion for it that I thought I was really going to become like this worldwide famous dancer, dancing all types of music. And then I actually started to learn salsa too. And that became a big part of my life. But because somebody asked me that question, like, what really led you into like serving? And I think it was because, having to see what everybody around me was doing and how they were really changing, or making an impact, I would say. Making impact in people's lives. I think that for me, I started to learn to have a passion for it. And so, especially having to relate what my upbringing was and those struggles for me and my mom, and having to see those struggles, and, having her to be a single mom and seeing all of that in my life, it really came together for me. And this is why I was like, well, here we are. I'm going to be a public servant, and I'm going to wear it in my sleeve and in my heart. And that's just what it is. I always say that I'm cut from a cloth of the older generation that was from the executive directors in Aspira. Off the top, oh my God, Evelyn Briganti,
Rosie Achilla.
oh, I mean, I can't even tell you all the folks that have been there, but they were Puerto Rican and they wanted to do something with these kids. And, you know, Angel could give you a little bit of a much more backstory of Aspira because he was very integral part of that organization as well. But for me, it's having to be able to, like, over the years in my upbringing, started to recognize, like, okay, now, I thought I was, okay, hip. I used to do graffiti. Anybody know? They know. And I used to dance house music. And that was my life.
What was your street name?
Mama. M-A-M-A. And I did tag it. And yes. And I remember carrying a book bag with spray cans, you know, markers, and all the things that perhaps were not really that I shouldn't have been doing. But nonetheless, that was the culture. That was the culture at the time for me. And I really integrated in that way of kind of like, what was that street art? Because that was my that was my life.
You didn't do it when she started working.
No,
there,
I stopped.
okay?
Please, yes. Let's kind of make, for clarity purposes. No, you know, prior to me going into learning what is true service, you know, having to integrate, you know, and change that up, but also, you know, that upbringing, you know, I feel like, you know, you bring that to the table even when you're doing public service. And I'll tell you why. That's really important piece to that, because you're servicing these people that you can relate to, because I know what that struggle is. I've seen my mom struggle, right? And it was so important for me to kind of, I would say, learn from my community and my upbringing and bring it to that part of service for me. Mm-hmm. So, because again, we understand the disparities and struggles, and we were like, well, you know, let's try to do something about it. Let's try to change that. But I would say that I would say Aspira had a lot to do with that. It really, really did, because, you know, it was a point too that I was hired for a little while prior to going into, before Angel hired me, I was hired to work for Aspira for a little while, which was a really good experience there for me too.
Big shout out to Aspira.
Aspira was a very essential part of, you know, me going literally into like City Hall alone. And one thing that I failed to mention at that point, where when Ed Rendell was mayor, when he was mayor, Manny Ortiz was his deputy mayor. And so obviously with the connection of Aspira and where they wanted their kids to be, I was chosen just to intern in Manny's office. And so having to be, for a very short time, to be under Manny, and then learning that his wife taught me, Nilda Ortiz. And she walked in one day in the office and says, Luz? And I said, Nilda? Well, no, Miss Ortiz. And so I say that to say that, again, it really came full circle for me at that moment. But that was one of the reasons why, because of that position, just an internship, then getting recommended to be hired by Angel. But again, I had to earn that, and I had to interview for that, and I did. So,
Antonia Pantoja.
Oh yeah, and Angel told me, he says, if you don't buy her book, I actually had to make sure I buy her book and make sure I learned.
I worked for Aspira, and the first thing they made you do, as far as when you go into orientation, you had to see a whole documentary.
Yes, that's part of that.
And I'm not gonna lie, in the beginning, I was like, oh, I gotta sit here and watch the documentary. Next thing I found myself like, oh my God, like this is amazing, and powerful.
Antonia Pantoja was, she took me in. Okay.
You knew her personally?
Huh?
You knew her personally?
Oh yeah, no, Tony was my mentor.
Oh my God. Look at that.
Tony Pantoja was my mentor. You know, there's a story about Tony Pantoja. In 1953, right? she was organizing in the Puerto Rican community at that time. She went to a Board of Education meeting. And we're talking about schools. She had a sack. Un saco. Esos brown, esos sacos brown. She had a sack. This is a story that was told to me by Hector Vázquez with the National Director of Puerto Rican Forum, who I worked for. And she went up to a hearing of the Board of Education. She got up and then took the microphone. And she said, I'm here to represent the conditions of the kids in my barrio and the schools. I don't have a speech, but I have this. And she opened up the sack and like 20 rats came out.
What?
Shoom! And she said, that's what my kids live through every day when they go to school.
Oh.
Oh.
And she turned around and left.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I thought that was Antonio Pantoja, 1953. That's the story I was told.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's what this is about, capturing these moments in history.
And when I met her, I had just graduated from the University of Puerto Rico. But I had met her before because I was at Seward Park High School, and ASPIRA was beginning in 1960.
Oh.
Was part of the National Puerto Rican Forum, Hector Vázquez, and so on. ASPIRA began in 1960. 1960, I went to Puerto Rico to be at the university, but I had met her when I came back for summer. I met her, and then I went back for my second year. When I came back, she actually, says, you're going to go here, here, here. And she directed me, said, you're going to go to graduate school. You're going to go here. Okay. And then she became my mentor throughout my life.
What was your impression in first meeting Angel, and how did that happen?
Well, first of all, I was very young, very young. And I think Angel could tell you the story much better than I can, but his words, he says, first thing I remember is you coming in and just chewing gum. So they made me throw the gum out. I just took the gum out, threw it away.
On a short skirt.
A short skirt. And coming into the office and just thinking back and thinking about like my first impression coming in, I feel like at that moment, it didn't all come together for me. Remember, I'm born and raised here in North Philadelphia, right? And community was something that I was already a part of, right? Growing up in this community, going to Julia de Burgos and, being part of the Latino community around here. It's just like you're learning, and me at that young age, if I think of myself at that young age and coming into the office, it just didn't come together just yet until I would say everybody, and I do not say this lightly. It's like I just get so passionate about it because I remember it's been very impactful throughout my whole entire life, but I could just remember that everyone in that office, including Angel, gave me a run for my money. And the reason for that is because they were like, okay, we have this young girl here, right? She doesn't know Spanish. Remember?
Yeah.
Okay. Not a word of Spanish. And Angel goes, you need to go home and you need to grab a Spanish newspaper or watch telenovelas. So I go, okay. And then I went home and I said, because at home my mom speaks to me in Spanish, but yet I'm answering her in English. Mm-hmm. So I go, Mom, I got this job, and mind you, I think I don't know at that point how much time I had in between
talking. I think she was 18.
Yeah, 17, 18 around there, yeah. And he says, well, I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, why did I really learn in the household? You know, I guess just like when you're born here, it's like that's your first language. But nonetheless, fast forward, and not to get into too many details, I did watch telenovelas. I did pick up a Spanish newspaper. And although that I didn't know the words, I would try to pronounce it. I would ask. And that's how I learned. And also, when answering those phones, and there was a Spanish constituent, I had to make sure that I spoke to them in Spanish. And if I had to pause and remember how to like convey that message or like remember a word or something like that, I would just take my time with it. But eventually I got so fluent that had it not been for me working in that office, I would have never known how to speak Spanish.
Well, she also had to
And
go to
write
school.
and read and school. So and school. So they were very strict with me in that office. So and like I said, they really did give me run for my money, and they did not hold anything back when it came down to that, because they were very specific. You go to school, because at the time I had graduated high school. You're going to college, no exception. You work here, you're going to go to college. It was a requirement. They did not have, there was no excuse for me. Okay, there was like, you have to do this, like you have to go to school. And let me get something very straight. My mom also wanted that for me, but I think that when you're growing up, you do have a sense of rebellion, you know, and having to see these struggles. And let's not forget, like it was rough. Mm-hmm. It was rough. I fought, you know, and I'm not very proud of saying those things, you know, but at the same time, when I was, you know, being a part of Aspira and interning, and then this kind of journey of my life, it was like almost like a slap in the face, I would say. It really was. Because you're like, you need to stop. This is what you need to do. And this is the requirement. Like Angel said, this is the requirement. And this is what you got to do. And if you want to be a leader, this is what we expect from you. And I said, okay. There was nothing more to say when I had gotten that directive. And also had to make sure that I did the constituency and meet all of the expectations in that office. So I feel like I did learn for the best. And I learned from folks that, just like you had mentioned earlier, that had such a passion for the community, wrong, right, or indifferent, whether, you know, someone was either attacking us, someone was in opposition or whatever legislation that either Angel, you know, introduced at the time, whatever the case was, we still serve with dignity, integrity, and passion, and making sure that we did what we needed to do there. So
we fast forward a little bit. You were working for a council person for a little bit, right? Am I correct?
Yes. So at the time, let's just fast forward. I became, and again, everything that I did really did stem from working with Angel. This included with working for a council member by the name of Bill Greenlee, William Greenlee to be exact.
Good guy, by the way.
Bill Greenlee, and this is how we knew each other, is because Angel was in the 580, which is in City Hall. Anybody that knows that fifth floor, okay, so Angel's in 580. Next door was a giant Republican, but very good friends with Angel, Thatcher Longstrength. In the other side of the hallway, before coming in, there was another office by another council member by the name of David Cohen. David Cohen's legislator was Bill Greenlee. And because we had integrated not just colleagues and coworkers and me coming in very young, but I feel like we also kind of created this dynamic of family. And before we get into Bill Greenlee, I want to share something that I used to do, because when you had those folks that really advocated, I mean, in city council and did not just hold anything, you have folks, Angel Ortiz, you had David Cohen, I believe
Marion Tasco.
Marion Tasco. I mean, just to name a few. That was us. And I used to run, obviously you got the spiral stairs, and every time I used to hear him on my microphone, I was like, oh, this is going to be a great one. And I would go down to city council and I would look at that fight and that passion, because when they would do the public hearings, remember city council, obviously the way it's broken down when they do the introduction of legislation and all that other stuff, but I'm talking about the hearings, okay? This is something separate from when they do their, normal operations, when, city council is in session, right? And those are the ones that I used to run down for, because that's where I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to learn where that advocacy, that passion, and really wanted to serve and try to see how this trajectory is changing literally right before my eyes. So I got to tell you, that experience for me will always and forever be a part.
No, thank you for sharing that. I want to jump in there real quick before we fast forward on a few things.
Yeah.
When we play dominoes, there's this one moment where somebody says "ficha," right?
Uh-huh.
They need to know what you have in your hands, right? What do you have in your hands? And what you just dropped right now was that moment, because you wanted to know what everybody was holding in their hands. And I want to challenge folks who are watching the show. Many names were dropped today. Research, Google. Find out who these people are, what they stood for, what they were about. And I'm even going to go to the point where even if you're listening to this and you don't know much about politics and you hear the word legislation and so many different things, Google the word legislation. There's nothing wrong with not knowing it now, but there is something wrong with it, right? There's power, right? There. So if you are listening, you're watching this show and a lot of language is being used, I want to challenge you to figure out what you don't know, research it, so you could empower yourself, but also have a better understanding of history, what took place, and why we need to keep moving forward. So fast forward a little bit, you even worked for the governor. Am I correct?
I did.
When you talk about that position?
Yes. And again, it's it really led into, obviously, all the things that I'm doing now in today's, and I would say in these days, right? But I wanted to touch one second on Bill Greenlee real quick, because I think this is a really important piece where, because I feel like he was such a part of that thread of leadership, okay, and advocacy. It was really, really important for me to work for him. I did work prior to that for Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown, which is someone that I got to tell you, although that it was not as long as I was with Bill at the time, but this is a woman, a African-American Black woman that I got to tell you, she taught me I would say what I learned from her was her work ethic, and sometimes that in life, depending on the circumstances, that it just does go around the clock. When I tell you that she was somebody that literally worked around the clock, you best believe if you got a late call, it's because you needed to do something for it. So, I want to say that to say it's because, again, in my roles and the different positions that I had throughout city council and government, I've learned so much from a lot of people. So on that note, fast forward, after my time with Councilman Bill Greenlee, I remember, I think this was in 2017 at the time. And so Angel and another individual that I cherish very much, his name is Obra Canoto, to be exact. He's a junior, actually. Angel was very good friends with his father, senior. So
we went to law school together.
they went to law school together. So having to have a best friend that's named Obra Canoto Senior, and then having my best friend, Obra Canoto Jr. He was my best friend. And he came, he says, we went to Tequila's, remember? Went to Tequila's. He says, and now he turns to me, he's taking a glass of wine. He likes red wine, right? He goes, are you ready? And I go, I'm ready. I'm ready. And They laid out the cards for me and they said, okay, obviously this is going to be an interview process, but you have to make sure that, just like anything else, because nothing is given to you. You have to earn it. And this is what I've learned from him. You have to earn it. However, if he's telling me that I'm ready for something, you best believe I'm going to go for that challenge. And I'm going to go and say, okay, well, all right, I think we're here at this point. Let's go for it. So that's what it was. And needless to say, I think at the time, the first year of that was an individual prior to myself serving the 1 year. But, I think there was just some issues or whatever. And then they actually asked me I had interviewed. And so they were like, okay, now you're commissioner.
What did you interview for? What did you interview for?
I interviewed for the governor's office of, so it's acronym for GACLA, Governor's Advisory Commission on Latino Affairs, right? And so
that's the name we gave.
Right, right. It was founded back in 19.
Shot. It's 85 actually, but it changed. The name changed from Hispanic to Latino.
To Latino.
Yeah.
So it was an agency that has definitely been around, and I gotta tell you, I'm not sure if there was any other person appointed here in the city of Philadelphia. I did hear there was one person prior to myself, but I'm a Philly native, born and raised, right? And here I come being appointed eventually. Obviously, getting the interview and then being appointed by the governor. I got to tell you, that did come with a set of challenges and such a learning curve for my whole career, my career in general, having to be able to be the advocate for close to 1 million Latinos here in the state of Pennsylvania. Not only that, that's a huge responsibility, but also making sure that you're doing the work. How are you going to build this agency to be able to project what we're doing, but not only that, having to build that partnership. And I think that it does take a lot of skill and a lot of wit, because if you cannot be able to sit in a room, and which has happened, sit in a room, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, with a bunch of white men, and I'm the only Latina, and demanding that we need certain things, then there's a problem. There's a problem. If I'm not able to do that and be able to advocate in that sense, then that position shouldn't have been mine, but it was, and I was grateful for it, and I did not take every second.
How long have you done that position?
I was there for the whole entire time of the governor, which he serves for the 8 years. And so it's not like a regular position. Is anybody in that position now? Yeah.
Who is that person?
Her name is Olga Negron.
Olga Negron.
Tom Wolf was the candidate for governor, and he was at 0. He was the last individual. Mm-hmm. I supported him when he was at 0. And we campaigned, and actually he went to Puerto Rico with me. Mm-hmm. I took him to Puerto Rico, and we campaigned, mm-hmm. and he won.
Governor Tom Wolf went to Puerto Rico.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
No, and that was an experience in itself. So
this is good, and thank you for sharing that. And on this position, I'm going to ask folks again: research this, mm-hmm. look this up. How can we get involved? How can we make sure the right person is representing Latinos mm-hmm. in Pennsylvania, and at the same time, just equipping ourselves with enough knowledge? But I have a quick question before we start just wrapping up a little bit more. Is there any advice you have for younger folks, even some older folks, but particularly younger folks, if they want to get involved with politics, and should they, and why? I know we had our copy gold moment earlier, but what advice can you give in short detail to a young person, that has aspirations for that? What is one key thing that they need?
Don't be afraid. Mm. Don't be afraid, and just, if you want it, go get it. Mm-hmm. Okay? And when I decided, it's because I said somebody needs to do it, and it doesn't matter, when they when I said, they said, well, Puerto Ricans can't get elected citywide in the city. I said, why not? And if they say to you, you can't do that, and you say, why not? Right? The issue is you got to believe in yourself.
Oh, yes.
And you got to have a set of principles that you want to fight for.
Amazing, right there.
Okay? And you have to have a certain amount of anger at the situation
There you
that
go.
you're in.
There you
And
go.
that your people are in.
Yes.
Mm.
Because if
Yes.
you don't have that sense of anger
Mm.
at the conditions that we're in, and we're still in, by the way, you know, Puerto Ricans and Latinos specifically, you know, so on, we're still in a lower level position of powerlessness.
I
And
love
there
that.
has to be an anger about that.
I love that. I love that you're saying that we have to be in anger. So is there a difference between being frustrated and anger, right? I think anger makes you move, right?
Yes.
People being frustrated because they're not moving,
Prevents
right?
you from moving.
Yes.
Prevention from moving. So I noticed that in today's time, there's a lot of frustration, but not enough anger. I feel as though not a people, you know, so much going on in our community, in our society, and so many things that are being put in place that will hurt us or send us back. And I think folks are acting out, being frustrated instead of being angry.
Yeah. And you don't know that, you know, you're not gonna, you can't say to yourself, well, you know, I'm not gonna make it. Right? You got to say, no, I'm gonna try. Okay. And I remember that day. When I went over to Izzy and Manny, and we went. I said it. We're in Izzy's backyard, and I said, somebody got to run. And I said, I'm going to run. And then I told Izzy, I said, you're going to be the campaign manager. And he said, what? And I gave him a book. I actually gave him a book, how to be a campaign manager. And to Manny, said, you're the chair. And they all looked at each other and said, I said, we got no money, but the three of us here, okay? And then we had Rosie Archilla, we had Nilda, we had my wife, and so on, you know.
I love it.
I mean,
I love this story.
there's a group of people that said,
I love it.
we're going to do it.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I just love this story. I you know, just to hear how it started. Maybe we need to get the next person in Izzy's backyard. The next person in Izzy's backyard, right?
Oh,
and make this movement happen all over again. But
he'll be welcome to it, by the way. He'll love that.
if you don't mind, I think folks should know this and want to know this. You don't mind speaking on your some of the careers of your children right now? What's going on?
Well, you know, my daughter is an actress, very good one.
Yes, she is.
She's Angel Ortiz. She's incredibly famous and incredibly talented. She was the star of Devious Maids, Ugly Betty, and so on. I'm incredibly proud of her because
We all are.
I remember her, okay, when she was in 8th grade. And I think, and she said, Daddy, I'm going to be an actress. And I said, go for it. And then she applied for the High School of Performing Arts here. Okay? And, you know, and then she went to Performing Arts College here. Okay? And she came to me one time and said, I'm going to Hollywood. She took my Volkswagen. She took my Volkswagen. I gave it to her, and she drove from Philadelphia to Hollywood. Wow. I mean, that is wanting something, right?
That's right.
And then going and get it. And she knew she had the support. You know, I said that, Nana, you know, if you want that, you always have the support here. And so she took my Volkswagen and drove to LA.
Did you get your Volkswagen back?
No. And then, you know, then she started getting these parts. you know, and there was a police show where she got the first part where she had one line. God, it was a police. Smith.
NYPD, no?
Smith.
Okay.
Jimmy Smith.
Jimmy Smith.
Yeah.
Was the star of the show, and she had one line, and I said, "Man, everybody was, in front of the TV set for that one line." Man.
That's a problem.
But she, now she's Ana Ortiz. She is a star. She is, and she did it because she believed in herself, okay? And we believed in her. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for believing in us here, coming to our show, in this project, in the movement. It just states a lot. It means a lot to us for you to be here. And I want to thank you so much. Thank you for what you have done for our community, for me personally, and in your career and how you continue to influence people. It's an honor to be here at the Domino table with you on this stage. Thank you, Luz, for sharing that story. You're still young, so we got a long way to go.
And I gotta tell you, there's so much stuff that we really haven't covered, but it's really just something that I will always and forever take with me, because that's what made me the woman that I am today, is because of my journey, and even the ups and the downs and the struggles and the losses. That's even another whole topic. But one other highlight that I think that we would be remiss if not to mention, Angel used to host, remember, every year the Three Kings.
Yeah, still do.
Still do. That is something that has been tradition for how long?
45 years.
45 years. And Lydia and everybody that was involved, anyone that worked
Santa
for
Claus
him,
has never come to my house. Santa Claus.
but he always did the Three Kings, okay? And that's something that we need to highlight, only because that's where a lot of people started to have ideas whether we're going to gonna run for office. So a lot of things happened throughout those 44 years doing the Three Kings celebration in Angel's house, with a lechon outside, with
speaking on that,
and all the things.
We're trying to get out here now to roast a pig during our Coquito Fest.
Okay, see, that's what I'm talking about. Yes,
I'll bring that back once all this is done here. Yeah. So we look forward to that. Once again, I want to thank you both. This is, Somos Society is about putting the pieces together for everyone, grabbing that history, because a lot of times, where can anyone walk into a place and just look at Puerto Rican history, right? But now they could not just go on this website and find it, but also just listen to you, right? Listen to your story, because to me, I was just so amazed of just the backyard story, man. Just the backyard story to me is so amazing, like how movement happened and how history was made in the backyard, because sometimes we forget we just need to do things and make it happen. No, we don't need to have a penthouse on the 50th floor to have a meeting about what we're going to do.
Or $100,000.
Or $100,000, right? Which doesn't, it helps though. But it does help, but it doesn't mean that we don't move, right? And what we need to move in our pockets is anger. And I've learned that. Yes. Anger makes you move. Frustration keeps you stuck. Yeah. And we need to be angry. And sometimes anger is good.
Sometimes anger, it moves you because if you see conditions and you just get frustrated by them, but if you see conditions that are oppressive and so on, and you don't do something, then it's your fault, because you see it and you don't do anything about it. Okay?
There was a lot of people who advocated for me out there during my case. It was a high publicity case. And I ended up doing 8 years. I didn't get life in prison. I was 16 when I went away. When I came home, I just wanted to give back and pour into. Many of those folks got their own organizations and doing many other things. Many of them would not hire me when I came home. You advocated for me, but you wouldn't hire me or point me in the right direction. Not all of them, but many of them. And it was kind of like, but you were there for me. And I need you more now. And I just want to say that people like Johnny Rosari, yourself, and so many other people who advocated then and still advocate. You know,
Yeah.
you pick up the phone when I call you.
Yeah.
When I ask you to be a part of the show, you're here. And even to this day, with everything I have done and accomplished in my life, there are some folks that are still nervous about being around me on a picture or a video because of a mistake I made when I was 16. And
I remember.
yeah, and that's another thing too. I remember with you. Don't do on here wrong because he remembers your name. He remember every teacher and every person. But
Yes.
thank you for remembering me. You know, there's
Yeah.
a saying, and I like to use it a lot when I'm dealing with young folks. You know, put yourself around 10
Yeah.
people. If 9 of them are not doing anything with their lives, and you're the 10th person,
Right.
most likely you're not going to be doing anything with your life.
Yeah.
But if you put yourself around the people that are doing things, most likely you're going to be doing the same
Yeah.
thing. And you were in that position to be around so many great people, more than 9 people in your life. So I think for me, is some of the advice I would give out to folks is no matter how young you are, how old you are, if you want to make some certain moves, you need to put yourself around those folks that are doing those things to get you there. It's just about finding out who those people are.
Exactly.
Who's doing the movement, what they're about. How do you get involved? How do you get yourself around it? It's very important because it rubs off. I don't care who you are. You know, if you're out there, again, if you around a bunch of people not doing nothing with their life and around the people just complaining and being, because complaining is not a strategy.
No.
Complaining is not a strategy. And I one of Angel's favorite words is organizing. I believe, because I hear him mention that so many times. And organizing means there's a movement. You're organizing, you're going to move forward. So complaining is not a strategy, but doing something is, and putting yourself in these predicaments.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, don't complain, organize.
So
That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that, man. I'm sorry, I'm just in awe today. This is amazing, and I'm loving the show because I feel like I have front row seats right now, you know, to be a part of this and to hear this live here. And again, I just want to thank you so much. I think, I know we are indebted to you as a community, and you know, and today is one of those days that we're hoping, not just hoping, we know that those who are watching us now get a piece of that history, piece of the new generations that are emerging, and the legacy that you're still here. So we want to give you your flowers while you're here, right? We don't got any flowers, so we give you some mata, right?
I like it.
Good.
But you are an icon, you're a legend, you're a giant, you're a human being with a big heart, right? And you're a man with righteous anger. And thank you. Well, this wraps up another episode, and I want to thank you for joining us on Domino Dialogues. For more information, if you want to just look at the episodes, many other episodes, and just learn more about history, check out somosociety.com. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. See you on the next show.